Good morning and welcome to the video worship experience of Zwingli United Church of Christ for this Sabbath day, September 6th, 2020. Today we're looking just a bit at conflicts between our church family and our communities and looking a lot about resolution and reconciliation. My name's Pastor Lance Smith and we are here at the historic Greene County Courthouse in Monroe, Wisconsin. Before we start, I have a few things I'd like to ask you to do. A few people I'd like for you to keep in your thoughts and prayers. Those in isolation at home and in assisted living centers. Those who've been touched by this virus, either they themselves or their family members have been touched by it. Maybe they've seen infection in their families or just had a positive test. Our public servants, our police and emergency and fire personnel, our students and teachers who are bravely risking their lives as well as the lives of their families to return to help get things back to normal. Prayers for our medical personnel and their support staff as they battle this virus, and also prayers for those who are working on a vaccine, that we get some help soon from this plague. Prayers for those who have been ravaged by storms. And lastly, the essential workers who keep us in food and provide our needs, such as the farmers and the producers and the retail people and the truckers. They keep us going. And most of all, I'd like for you to pray for patience and strength for all of us as we go through this age of COVID-19. I'd like to greet you with the phrase we greet people with every Sunday morning. The Lord is with you. Even with a congregation of 2 or 3, you will be present with us, O God. Even with our record of ignoring and neglect, you will be present with us, O God. Even with our questions and doubts, you will be present with us, O God. Even as we risk an adventure, you will be present with us, O God. Even when our world is turned upside down, you will be present with us, O God. We will worship an ever-present God. Let us pray. Out of grace beyond imagining, God created us. We rejoice that we can bring thanksgiving and praise to God. With the needs of family and friends and the vulnerable, God has challenged us. We rejoice that we call on God to help us meet those needs. Through the Bible, through the words of leaders, prophets, and Jesus Christ, God has spoken to us. We rejoice that God's word is an inspiration and a guide to us. In the midst of this community of faith, God has given us fellowship. We rejoice in the fellowship and friendships and the common acts of service which are ours. In the world where inequality reigns and the powerless struggle, God calls us to act. We rejoice in the privilege to serve as Christ served before us. Amen.
When I Pray for You by Matthew Paul Turner. Illustrated by Kimberly Barnes.
From the moment I saw you, I started to pray. Big prayers and small ones, I have sent God's way. I prayed as I held you when you sat on my lap. I prayed while we rocked as you peacefully napped. As you took your first steps and when you started to run, as I pushed you on swing sets or we skipped in the sun. I prayed you felt safe, full of joy and content, that when I whispered, I love you, you knew what I meant. When you said your first word, repeating what you'd heard, when you mooed like a cow or tweeted like a bird, when you giggled out loud or made yourself proud, to God I said thank you, and to you I said, wow. As I watched you pretend, all alone or with friends, I prayed over you again and again. 'Cause when I pray for you, God knows this is true. Every word I whisper, is a prayer for me too. At the moment I hear you jump out of bed, I start praying that God puts good things in your head. I pray when you're smiling and when you feel sad. I pray when you're sick, embarrassed, or mad. When you're kicking a ball or twirling in place. When I know what you're thinking by the look on your face. I pray you grow strong, have passion and fight, and stand up for what's good with all of your might. I pray heaven protects you, that you're generous and kind, that your brave little spirit never ceases to shine, that you believe in yourself and follow what's true, that your confidence grows just as fast as you do. As I drive you to school while you splash in a pool, as you challenge a friend to a lightsaber duel, when you open your eyes to a birthday surprise, when the joy on your face cannot be disguised. I pray you love well, that the light in you swells, that the story God writes is the one that you tell. 'Cause when I pray for you, I imagine God's view, and I pray all that God sees comes alive inside you. When suddenly it seems you've gotten so tall, when you've grown up so much that my lap's way too small, when you're glued to a screen or your bedroom's unclean, when you're no longer a child, but not yet a teen. I'll pray when you're hyper, obnoxious, or chill. I'll pray when you're chatty and cannot sit still. When you're running relays or performing school plays, or you're somewhere in the middle of a garage band phase. When you know all the answers or just think that you do. When you find out the hard way, you know less than you knew. I'll pray you choose hope should you ever face fear, and seek wisdom with patience when the pathway's unclear. That you will love others, whether strangers or friends, with the same kind of love that God feels for them. When you break from your shell to stand up for yourself, and I realize you didn't ask me for my help, I'll pray and I'll cheer, I'll probably shed a tear, and hope that you know if you need me, I'm here. 'Cause when I pray for you, no matter what we go through, the dreams that you dream, I'll be dreaming them too. At the moment you realize it's time to explore, I'll pray God gives you wings, and like an eagle, you'll soar. I'll pray where you go, that wherever you land, you'll find purpose and meaning and a role in God's plan. That you'll know who you are and like what you do and love yourself fully as God wants you to. I'll pray you keep shining, that God keeps refining, that your story reflects what in you God's designing. That you'll give and you'll share with compassion and care, that how you live life will, to God, be a prayer. 'Cause when I pray for you, I pray all that you do brings love and brings light and helps the world shine like new.
Today's scripture is from Matthew 18, verses 15 through 20. If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them.
Common Lectionary is a document that's put together by a bunch of theologians and respected people in the religious community. And most of the mainstream churches use the Common Lectionary so that they can go through the entire Bible. The pastors can go through the entire Bible without stumbling on a few choice passages that they really, really love, because that's what they would do. That's what I would do if I didn't use the lectionary. I'd stick to like 3 or 4 passages. That's why most of the churches this Sunday are going to be preaching on this gospel text in Matthew. So if you're going by the marquees and you see Matthew 18, you'll know that we're all preaching from the same page, so to speak. But it's interesting how this document that they've put together and this schedule that they have, we're in year A and the season after Pentecost. It's interesting how each week the choices of the scriptures seem to fit my life or seem to fit the surroundings of the world around us. They seem to fit it to a T. And this week especially, it's saying, "Hello, Lance." And I said, "I hear you, Lord." I have to admit, I have to confess that when it comes to conflict, I'm a real coward. I just about do anything to keep from conflicting with someone or facing conflict with someone. I do just about anything. But this scripture talks about conflict and resolution, about what we need to do, what we need to say. Jesus is always saying we need to stand up for justice. We need to stand up for those who have no voice. But also it's how we stand up. It's how we go about going into these relationships and trying to resolve these conflicts that's important. Because the walk of Christ is continually failing, confessing, forgiving, and reconciling. I have a very dear friend who believes this verse is designating the church and ultimately the pastor as judge, jury, and executioner of all injustices. I also think there are a great many people who believe that following Christ is about being a good little boy or girl and never doing anything wrong and always being correct. All of these ideals, my friend, and these ideas are impossible. There are no perfect people. And the world is too small and connected for each of our actions not to affect others. Toes get stepped on. People who believe they are in the right are at times coarse and calloused, and at times mean-spirited in their responses to infractions or in supporting their beliefs. I've heard the phrase, "church people mean well." I just wish they weren't so mean. Some of us, perhaps all of us at times, are more willing to ostracize our brother or sister than to take the time to reconcile with them. And I totally get it. It takes time and effort to reconcile. It takes careful thinking about what you are saying and how you are responding. And time is a precious commodity, something we all feel we have very little of. Many people I know think the concept of conflict resolution is to not only force the other party to agree or concede with them, but they wish to be validated that they are in the right. They want their righteousness to shine above all in each and every matter. You guessed it, folks. The text is about conflict, but mostly about resolution. I think sometimes we think that this text is about law and execution of the law. We feel justified in judging and extracting people from our community who do not agree with us. All too easily we write someone off who does not agree or is doing something that we deem as not the way we do things here. We take things so personal and become emotional about them. In some ways that's good. It means that you care. The question is, what or who are you caring about? We get ourselves so worked up we want to offend. We want the offender to be penalized or humiliated, and in some very strange way, we read that penalization as supporting for our wants and ideas. I have just one question in all this. WWJD. Remember those cheesy bracelets that were popular years ago? They ask a question that we should be asking ourselves continually. What would Jesus do? I'm thinking about all the times Jesus was in a situation with sinners, known sinners. The tax collector Zacchaeus, the Samaritan woman at the well, the adulteress he kept from being stoned. I want you to think a minute about those stories. I'm sure you all know them, and if they're not clear in your memory, you should find them and read them again. Did Jesus pin the woman down and force her to confess and demand her penance? Did he pull up the tax records and demand with force and lightning bolts the reparations of Zacchaeus' injustice to those whom he taxed? Does he even accuse them of their wrongs? As a matter of fact, he actually lets them realize their own sins by tactfully questioning them, allowing them to see the injustices that they have made. Then when they see it, what does Jesus do in those situations? He forgives. One of the things that brings this book we know as the Bible to life is how we interpret it into today's world. You must agree that our world and first century Palestine are quite different in many ways, but people at their core basic level are all the same. So to make it pertinent to our times, we have to read this gospel not through self-focused, sin-laden, me-ridden, self-serving lenses that we call eyes, but through the eyes of Christ. This Messiah that we are seeing in the writings of Matthew is a different leader than we are used to. One must read and reread these texts while asking ourselves to see the ideals that Christ is teaching. What would Jesus do? Read each text asking the questions, what is here about grace, mercy, peace, and reconciliation? Are these not the actions of the Christ? I believe the relationship of the community is far more important to the writer of Matthew and the early church than perhaps we give them credit for. I believe the relationship of the community is a solution to most of our problems in this world of 2020. Before we can even attempt to figure out this self-help conflict resolution management style, we have to look at the context of the passages before and after this text. The verses just before this, we explore the shepherd and his 99 sheep. The 99 he leaves to go find the missing one, teaching us everyone is important and we cannot lose them. And then, of course, there's Peter's questions of how many times should we forgive a wrong? 70 times 7 was the math lesson. And then again. It seems forgiveness in Jesus' mind is an ever-flowing well. Following this text that we're talking about today, we find the parable of the unforgiving debtor. You remember the guy whose master forgave his debt, but he did not show mercy on the people who owed him. Folks, this text can't be about discipline or how we treat people who don't agree with you. This text is about God's blessing on our relationships with one another. For heaven to exist, we must be able to live and work together and learn together. And more often than not, that means we cross paths with each other. So let's take a stroll through these few verses and see how Jesus is trying to teach us about righteous living and right relationships. Matthew 18, 15 through 20. And this is Jesus. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen, you have won them over. You know, in this text, this is kind of like one of those automated answering machines, you know, with the automated receptionist that says, if you would like to speak with the pharmacist, dial number 3 now. So if the case is that you go to the person tactfully and say, you really hurt me, you hurt my feelings, and they accept that, and they try to make reparations, then you immediately go to verse 19. If not, you proceed to verse 16. Verse 16 says, "But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses." You know, they're talking about approaching these people with helpful phrases like, "I know you didn't realize how much this hurt me," or "how much you're hurting yourself or others." Verse 17, "If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church." You know, there's nothing in here about tribunals or trials. All these things are kind of like interventions, gatherings, giving the offender the facts and the information they need to enhance the relationship. And it goes on in 17, "And if they refuse to listen, even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector." You know, they may decide not to be in relationship with you, as the Gentiles and the pagans were not in relationship with the Israelites. But even if you cannot find at least partial consensus, if you are still at an impasse after tons of attempts, you still got to love them, because they're still your neighbor. And that's that's the greatest commandment of all, says Jesus. Love your neighbor as yourself. As a leader and a planner, you can't brainstorm or put anything into effect that is dependent on the actions of another. You can only control your actions, how you respond, what words you choose to respond with. You, as the instrument of change, need to be the active player. While working with kids at camps and in school, I know well that I can get a better response from youth by phrasing things in a certain way. "Don't run across the room, you may hurt someone." That phrase does not produce the same response as, "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being so aware of your surroundings and the safety of others by walking across the room." Or, "Stop treating me this way," does not affect the same response as, "I forgive you for hurting me. I know you didn't mean to hurt me like that." Verse 18, Jesus goes on, "Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Well, that leads to the question of where is heaven? You know, he also says the kingdom of heaven is at hand. What are we binding here? This is the choice you are making about how you wish to live now and for eternity. Do you wish to live at war with your siblings, in constant conflict, or at peace? And now verse 19. This is what happens after you come to some kind of a reconciliation or resolution. Jesus says, "Again, truly I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 gathers in my name, there I am with them." You know, this conflict resolution strategy here can work for any disagreement of any size, any case or matter. You know, God blesses the expression of love within a community. Why? Because when we are all together, God is there also. It is the loving community that God is working toward. I remember my grandfather always trying to get all his family together, and it seemed all we did was fuss and fight with one another, mostly out of jealousy. We believed that one sibling was undeserving or one was getting more than the others, and it was always a mess. "Okay, Lance, okay, I hear you. We need to play nice and say only good things." No, that's not at all what we need to be doing. We need to be tactfully factual. Ooh, tactfully factual. Not only is that hard to say, it's hard to do. with our family, or we will forever struggle. What we don't need is to win. The prize, the ultimate goal, is reconciliation and understanding, which is very different than winning. If you look at relationships as a competition, you begin to consider your adversaries as enemies. And then it's a very short jump. You will find people are no longer people, but hurdles or obstacles that you need to jump over or go around or destroy. So here in these verses, which we have interpreted very differently over the years, we find some takeaways for living in the kingdom in 2020. Number one, God wishes so very much for us to find a harmonious way of living together. God also blesses the agreements that we share in our relationship. Each one of us bears a piece of the divine. The presence of God increases the more people we have in our discussions, events, prayers, and gatherings. Number two, we should never give up on a member of our community. You can isolate yourself from them, but they are still a huge part of your life. The commandment of Christ to love one another, even when we cannot agree with them, still pertains. Our ultimate goal is to find reconciliation. This is number three. And sometimes that means giving a little on something, or realizing that you're not totally right. It means putting a priority on peace and reconciliation over goods, ideas, transgressions, and revenge. And number four, lastly, if the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and we are the ones who bind or loose things in this world and the next, what kind of heaven shall we make? One of rules, regulations, enforcements, or one of peace, forgiveness, reconciliation, and love? May God grant us the courage to go the extra mile and to face up to each other and to speak tactfully about our relationships and our actions with ourselves and to others. May God give us patience to seek out and the resilience to keep trying to resolve our differences. May we mature and grow in our love of the Christ that lives within each one of us. Amen.
As a fire is meant for burning with a bright and warming flame, so the church is meant for mission, giving glory to God's name, not to preach or creeds or customs, but to build a bridge of care. We join hands across the nations, finding neighbors everywhere. We are learners, we are teachers, we are pilgrims on the way. We are seekers, we are givers, we are vessels made
Jesus says, wherever two or more are gathered, there I will be also. Surely the Christ is with us this morning. Let us take some time and just be in the presence of the Christ. Lord, we come here today to review your teachings, the teachings that you gave us so long ago, the teachings that we struggle even today, 2,000 years later, to understand and learn. Help us to remember that the most important thing is us, that you're not creating this kingdom for us, you are creating this kingdom with us. Help us to see the us before we see the me. Help us to follow that path in every interaction we have with one another. Help us to put us as the priority. Help us to learn how to reconcile and speak with one another. Help us to recognize the hurts that each and every one of us have and how we can eliminate them, Lord. Help us to learn to love one another as much as we love you. And in loving one another, we prove our love for you. We ask this in the name of the one who taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us, Lord, not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. And now as we leave this place, may we be forever looking at each other with the eyes of Christ, the eyes that look through the ideals of mercy, of peace, of reconciliation, of forgiveness. Amen.